Hello, my name is A.G. McClure, and I'm here with Bruce and Johanna Stewart, and they're going to be sharing a little bit about themselves today. So to start with, how did you come to know the Lord?
Johanna.
So I grew up in a Christian family with very faithful and godly parents and a lot of godly family and friends around and under really good teaching. My childhood and even further into my young adulthood, I really wondered what assurance of salvation meant. I didn't know. I didn't really feel like I was a believer, and it was so scary to me to think that I wasn't really a believer. And I don't think I could have said it to myself, even quietly in the darkest of places. So that carried on throughout childhood and into my young adulthood. And as all along, I created a lot of problems for myself and a lot of strife for my family, who loved me and were very faithful to care for me through all of the issues that I created through my rebellion. But I had a double life. I lived one way when I was outside of Eastwood, and I lived a different way when I was with my people at Eastwood. And it bothered me so much. And looking back, it was definitely the Holy Spirit that was bothering me because He was working in me. So one year when I was in college, or college age anyway, my best friend came to me and said she knows what she knows what we're gonna do. We're going to Beach Project this summer, and I didn't know what that was, but it looked like and it felt like an escape from a terrible situation I created for myself. So I went on to Beach Project, and it was probably the second week of Beach Project. I was faced with, we were at a rally, and I felt like for the first time in my life, I heard the gospel. Even though I know I'd heard it before, I'd heard it all my life under all the good teaching in my home, but it was like God gave me new ears to hear, and it was shocking, it was stunning. Our hymn that night was "Take My Life," and it was like all the lights clicked on, and I realized I had never given the Lord my life. So I ran to the bathroom, couldn't handle it, ran to the restroom, got my phone, called my mom, and sat in the bathroom and cried and told her what Jesus was doing in my heart. And then the Lord continued to grow me fast from all the faithfulness of my family and the Lord in my life in the early years. Felt like it was an explosion of growth, and things, all the puzzle pieces were clicking together. And so it's been a nonstop growth since then, and so that's my story.
So for me, I don't remember a time growing up when my parents weren't both in love with the Lord and in love with each other. And looking back on that now, that kind of shaped everything that we did as a family. So my parents put a big emphasis on gathering with God's people at the church to worship. And so growing up, it was family, it was relationship with the Lord, it was relationship with our church family. And so I heard the gospel all the time. And I remember one particular Sunday morning as an 8-year-old, sitting in Sunday school and hearing the gospel message in a different way. And so later that afternoon, we sat down and I asked the same questions again, and my mom presented the gospel to me in a way that, again, I hadn't heard up to that point. So I knew in that moment that I was a sinner, that I needed to be delivered from my sin. So I know for a fact that the Lord saved me as an 8-year-old in that moment. And then fast forward into high school, I had a youth minister, Tim McQuitty, who played a big part in my life. And one thing in particular, he asked me one day, he goes, "You know that you're a Christian?" And I said, "Well, sure, I know I'm a Christian." But he challenged me with, he goes, "But is Jesus the Lord of your life?" And of course, my initial reaction was, well, of course. But even in that moment, there was an idol that was starting to build in my heart. Baseball, sports became an idol that I allowed to fester in my heart. I chased after that. Everything that I did was in pursuit of that. And at the end of the day, the Lord allowed me to do that. The Lord allowed me to move away from home with a rebellious attitude, chasing after idols, but even in that context, spared me from a lot of foolishness, to the point where I was 2 years into that life and the Lord just made me absolutely miserable. So the only thing I knew to do was to go back home. So going back home for me meant not only returning to my family, but returning to the church. And when I returned to the church, again, another group of men snatched me up, began to disciple me. And my story since then has just been time after time of the Lord placing men in my life that are dependable, that I can follow.
Thank you, Bruce. So, next question. Can you tell us about a time that you've seen God's faithfulness to you?
When I think of the Lord's faithfulness, I can't help but think of the Stewart family story, our history. It all started with one man who was born in Scotland in the last part of the 19th century. It's my great-grandfather, George Thompson Stewart. When he was 12, both of his parents died. He was orphaned and was adopted by a family. Later on, about the time he turned 18, he met a traveling evangelist that shared the gospel with him, something that he had never heard before. And it was in that moment that he surrendered his life to Christ, and was at that moment that the trajectory of his life really changed. My great-grandfather has a daughter and has one son, and my grandpa was a pastor, and the desire of his father's heart became his desire that his name would carry on, and those that came after him would come to know the Lord. So my grandpa has 3 daughters and 1 son, which was my dad. And then my dad has 2 daughters and 8 sons. And just to see the explosion of faithfulness. So that's the 4th generation. And now we're in the 5th generation. There's 22 grandchildren. And it's really cool to think that if you're going to trace back the origin of where all this comes from, it really all traces back to the prayer of one righteous man praying to a faithful God, and God granting him his prayer.
We've seen God's faithfulness countless times. God is faithful and was faithful and will be faithful. It's easy to see or to say God's faithful, God's a good God when things are good, and it is a whole different thing to believe that God is faithful, to see his faithfulness and to trust the Lord when he has, when the circumstances are either tragic or just a shattering of your idea of what you thought your life was going to be, or you thought a situation was going to turn out. And we've experienced a lot of those. And one particular way has been in our finances. We've struggled a lot. Bruce is the hardest working person I know, and I'm so proud of him. And we have our 4 boys who also have wonderful work ethics as well. So working hard and still not being able to come out the other side on top feels defeating and deflating over and over and over again. The limitations that we've had on us has been the way in which the Lord has actually shown the most bright as far as his faithfulness. Like I said, we wouldn't have chosen these situations for ourselves. We wouldn't have chosen heartache or losses or shattered dreams. But it's actually been through all of those that we've seen the faithfulness of the Lord. And it's been so sweet to see that I can see the faithfulness of the Lord. And I know Bruce can see it, but so can our children, which is priceless.
That's a great story. Lastly, could you show us something that God has been teaching you recently?
What I've been learning recently is the best place for a child of God to be is in a place of utter dependence on him. And I think oftentimes the Lord uses open doors for us to possibly walk into a situation that's hard, that we're walking into a situation that's difficult, that's painful, It's not anything like what we thought it was going to be. But at the end of the day, if that experience increases our dependence on the Lord, then that's a good place to be. Another thing I'm learning is the Lord really can use you. He can use you in the midst of your weakness. The Lord is going to accomplish His plan. And the fact that we get to be a part of that in any capacity is pretty incredible.
Thank you for sharing those things with us. And thank y'all for joining us again.